The very first premise of Ayanokoji's enrollment in ANHS is because he wanted to run away from his father. We learn about it when Atsuomi came to school in Volume 7 of the first year arc. However, in Volume 8 of the second year arc, we were introduced to another possibility, which is that Ayanokoji's enrollment is part of Atsuomi's plan. Volume 0 later confirms this theory, where Atsuomi intentionally sent Ayanokoji to ANHS to take advantage of enemy territory. However, I have another interesting theory. I believe Ayanokoji's enrollment is not as simple as Atsuomi's plan, but there is another big person involved in this grand scenario, and that person is the Prime Minister Kijima. In this video, I will present you with the possibility that Kijima purposely let Ayanokoji enroll at ANHS, and that possibility could answer why Koenji was also sent to ANHS and what exactly Tsukishiro, Tsubasa, and Ishigami's roles are in the story. So, let's take a look at it one by one. First, let's get Ayanokoji's enrollment story straight. In Volume 7 first year arc, Atsuomi told us that Ayanokoji was born and raised in the White Room, but before he came to school, he was placed under Atsuomi's butler, Matsuo, because there was some kind of trouble in the White Room. Leaving the White Room for the first time, Ayanokoji got curious about the outside, and with the help of Matsuo, he decided to enroll at ANHS. However, there are a few holes in this story. The first question is, why did Chairman Sakayanagi decide to help Ayanokoji? From what he said in Volume 7, he chose to use his own assessment and put Ayanokoji in Class D, because by ANHS standards, Ayanokoji should have no qualification to enter. In short, he chose to be unfair to one student who should be able to enter ANHS if it weren't for Ayanokoji. However, this statement contradicts what he said after that, where he assures Ayanokoji that his daughter is not placed in Class A because she is his daughter, and their assessments are fair. Chairman Sakayanagi said that their assessments are fair, but if that was the case, Ayanokoji should have no chance to enter ANHS. This contradiction told us that there is more to Chairman Sakayanagi than what he showed. So far, Chairman Sakayanagi was very supportive of Ayanokoji, and he helped to protect him at the sports and cultural festival. From his action, we could conclude that he has no intention to expel Ayanokoji from school. However, just like what Sakayanagi said in Volume 4.5 second year arc, everyone has a dark side inside them, including her own father. Some of you might think that Atsuomi controls Chairman Sakayanagi behind the scenes, but first let's take a look at where Chairman Sakayanagi stands in the political world. The father of Chairman Sakayanagi is the first director of ANHS, and he had strong backup from Kijima, who was still Ministry of Education at that time. However, Chairman Sakayanagi chose to study under Naoi because he thought it would be important to learn from a different angle. At that time, Naoi and Kijima were the leaders of different factions under the same party. However, after Kijima's influence grew so big and Naoi realized it would be near impossible to fight him, Naoi chose to join hands with Kijima. This is where Naoi chose to ditch Atsuomi, and Chairman Sakayanagi follows his father's footsteps and becomes the new director of ANHS. Simply speaking, Chairman Sakayanagi is now part of the Kijima faction, so he and Atsuomi need to part ways. Since Chairman Sakayanagi is part of the Kijima faction, it should be easy for Kijima to order Chairman Sakayanagi to let Ayanokoji enroll at ANHS. Chairman Sakayanagi might be shown as a strong guy who didn't even budge in front of Atsuomi. However, in Volume 12.5, it was shown that he doesn't have enough power to oppose Kijima's order. As a result, the final special exam was changed, and Kijima even interfered during Mizono's expulsion by giving Ayanokoji another chance. If Chairman Sakayanagi cannot do anything to prevent it, then if Kijima orders him to let Ayanokoji enroll, he will have no choice but to obey. And that is the only possible scenario why Chairman Sakayanagi chose to be unfair with his judgment. One thing that made me sure about it is because Kijima doesn't show any reaction when he realizes Ayanokoji was there in ANHS, and Chairman Sakayanagi doesn't seem to get any punishment from him, so everything is most likely in his calculation. If this theory is true, then it will open another question. First, how did Kijima know about Ayanokoji and his enrollment? And second, why did he let Ayanokoji enter ANHS? Let's take another look at the truth behind Ayanokoji's enrollment so far, because Volume 0 literally changes the way we see the story. Ayanokoji was supposed to run away from his father, so Atsuomi sent Tsukishiro and the White Room students to try to expel him from ANHS. However, in Volume 8's second-year arc, Ayanokoji starts to speculate another possibility when he sees Tsubasa acting quite strange. Tsubasa was supposed to be a childhood friend of Matsuo Eiichiro, Matsuo's son who hanged himself because his life was destroyed by Atsuomi. Tsubasa, who found it, gets in contact with Tsukishiro and enrolls in ANHS to take revenge on Ayanokoji. Tsubasa was supposed to expel Ayanokoji from school, but since Volume 3's second-year arc, she has decided to protect Ayanokoji to keep him from expulsion. However, she made no reaction when Ayanokoji told her that he would be going on a school trip, as if she knew there would be no danger for Ayanokoji on his school trip. Tsubasa's mistake made Ayanokoji suspicious and start to question her entire story. That is where Ayanokoji makes a guess that Matsuo is probably still alive, and there was never a plan to expel him from school. Volume 0 confirms Ayanokoji's suspicion. His enrollment at ANHS is part of Atsuomi's plan, and he never has any intention to expel Ayanokoji from school. That means all his talk in Volume 7 is just an act, and Matsuo suggesting ANHS to Ayanokoji was also Atsuomi's order. The reason why Atsuomi sent Ayanokoji to ANHS is still unknown, but in Volume 12.5, he said that Ayanokoji finally proved himself useful, since his existence in school could help Atsuomi get close to President Koenji. There are only two other people who knew about Atsuomi's plan, Kamogawa and Tsukishiro. It is possible that Kamogawa might betray Atsuomi and leak the secret, but let's just ignore Kamogawa since we have basically no information about him, and focus on Tsukishiro. Tsukishiro was first introduced as Atsuomi underling who came to school to expel Ayanokoji. However, Volume 0 made it clear that Tsukishiro is not anybody's underling, but a neutral force who works with everyone for his own benefit. Noe was the one who introduced Tsukishiro to Atsuomi, and since Noe is now on Kijima's side, the fact that Tsukishiro is still working with Atsuomi should be known by Kijima. Needless to say, it's just natural if Tsukishiro works with both Atsuomi and Kijima, selling their information as a double agent. However, this is not a secret at all. When he was abandoned by Noe, Atsuomi made an agreement with Tsukishiro, where Tsukishiro could freely sell his information to Noe, but he would also receive information from him. So, it's safe to assume that Tsukishiro already told Kijima or Noe about Atsuomi's plan regarding Ayanokoji. Or, it's more accurate to say that Atsuomi let that information reach Kijima's ears. And now we reach the trickiest part. If Kijima knows about the Atsuomi plan, then there should be no reason for him to play along and let Ayanokoji enter the school. It's not wrong to think like that, but before making a conclusion, there are two things that we should consider. First, sooner or later, Atsuomi will become a thorn that will threaten Kijima, so it will be better to take care of him before he becomes a nuisance. And second, the existence of the White Room will make anybody raise their eyebrow, and if Ayanokoji is the masterpiece who came from that place, it will at least make Kijima a little curious. Kijima was presented with an opportunity to see how capable Atsuomi is, so he decided to play along and took advantage of that opportunity. Volume 12.5 might give us a little clue about what Kijima had done to anticipate Ayanokoji's enrollment. During Kijima's conversation with President Koenji, he said that it's been 3 years since their last meeting, and 3 years is the exact time when Ayanokoji's future as an ANHS student was decided. Kijima and President Koenji's conversation is the key, because two busy people like them wouldn't meet up just to talk about the weather. Even though we didn't know what they were talking about, we know that Koenji ended up enrolling at ANHS 1 year later, and according to Koenji, he preferred going back to China to continue his training instead of wasting his time with a bunch of kindergartners. Enrolling in ANHS is not Koenji's choice, and so far there is only one person who has been shown to be able to give an order to Koenji, which is his own father. So we could deduce that it was Koenji's father who sent him to ANHS, and because Koenji spent most of his time in China, he shouldn't have the qualification to enter ANHS. However, just like Ayanokoji, Koenji probably got some help from the inside, which once again leads us to Kijima. Kijima is probably the one who persuaded President Koenji to put Koenji in school. And just like that, Ayanokoji and Koenji ended up placed in Class D. The exact reason why Kijima wants to put Ayanokoji and Koenji in the same class is unknown, and from now on, we could only rely on speculation. Some of you might think Kijima wants to destroy Ayanokoji by using Koenji, but that reason is quite strange because Ayanokoji and Koenji were placed in the same class. If Kijima wanted them to compete, they should have placed them in a different class. We probably could find an answer if we look at Koenji's personality. For 10 years we have known him, competitive is one word that describes Koenji the least. He was written as someone who just minds his own business and doesn't care about other people and special exams. It's not because he has no confidence he could win, but because he has an absolute superiority complex that made everything look so boring in his eyes. Koenji believes he is perfect, and nobody is better than him. However, that kind of personality is not a good thing for someone who is still in his teenage days. If Koenji is really prepared to become the next leader of the Koenji conglomerate, he needs to learn to be humble, or else his arrogance will bite him in the future. Destroying Koenji's superiority is one possibility, but this possibility contradicts what President Koenji said in volume 12.5, that he has confidence in Koenji's ability because he gave him a proper education. If we pay attention during their conversation in volume 12.5, Kijima is the first one who mentions Ayanokoji in conversation, and it somehow ended up with the bet between Atsuomi and President Koenji. However, despite there being a possibility that his biggest investor will switch sides to Atsuomi, Kijima doesn't show any sign of worrying, and the most possible reason for his calmness is most likely because he also has absolute confidence in Koenji's ability. If both of them have absolute confidence in Koenji's ability, that means Koenji is not sent to ANHS to be humbled by Ayanokoji. If they believe Koenji is really as impressive as they think, perhaps the reason why Koenji was placed in Class D is because they thought he could bring Class D into Class A. This might be a very simple answer, but everything that we have seen so far supports this possibility. Koenji was tasked to graduate from Class A, and that's why he will do anything to not get expelled. However, instead of bringing his current class to Class A, Koenji found a loophole that could free him from the trouble, which was to buy private points from upperclassmen. Even though Nagumo said he would forbid that method, it seems there is still a loophole because in Volume 11 second year arc, Nagumo could freely transfer 3 million points to Ayanokoji. We could agree that Koenji was sent to ANHS in the hope he could bring Class D to graduate as Class A to prove that he is capable of becoming a leader. However, Koenji found the loophole, and Ayanokoji ended up carrying the whole class. This is where things turn in an unexpected direction. From Kijima's point of view, who most likely only read the report, Class D managed to rise despite all of their disadvantages, and he believed it was thanks to Koenji. However, in volume 12.5, he said that he came to school to see Koenji in the special exam, and I believe he was definitely shocked when he saw Ayanokoji did all the work, while Koenji did nothing. I still don't know why Kijima put Ayanokoji in the same class as Koenji, but I'm sure Ayanokoji outshining Koenji is not something that he wanted. However, the arrival of President Koenji changed everything. Now that Ayanokoji is changing class, the battle between Ayanokoji and Koenji is now unavoidable. So, we could conclude that it was Kijima's idea to put Ayanokoji and Koenji in the same class. He was hoping Koenji could bring Class D to graduate as Class A, and while he is at it, it wouldn't be a bad idea to put Ayanokoji in check. However, because Koenji didn't do anything and Ayanokoji ended up stealing the spotlight, Kijima threw the bait to Atsuomi and President Koenji so they would create the bet. Thanks to Ayanokoji changing class, everything starts to return to the original plan, but now Koenji's challenge is not to reach Class A, but to keep his class position until graduation. However, the war between Kijima and Atsuomi is far from finished. In fact, everything has just begun. At the beginning of the second year arc, Tsukishiro placed 3 students who are not supposed to be there in ANHS. 2 of them are the White Room students sent by Atsuomi, and the other is Tsubasa Nanase, whose real identity is still a mystery. She is not a White Room student, and since her backstory about being a childhood friend of Eiichiro is probably just a made-up story, even her connection with Atsuomi needs to be doubted. One thing for sure about Tsubasa is that she has a special connection with Tsukishiro. Volume 1 third year arc confirms that Tsubasa still maintains contact with Tsukishiro using a special phone that is not provided by the school, and she will keep observing Ayanokoji for another year, just like what Tsukishiro told her to do. This scene confirms that Tsubasa follows Tsukishiro's orders, but where Tsukishiro found Tsubasa is a big question to answer. Tsubasa is definitely not a normal child. Even though her ability is far behind the White Room student, her intelligence and physical ability are far above the regular student. However, the strangest thing is Tsukishiro trusted her to be his spy inside the school, so Tsubasa is not just some random student that got paid to do the job, but probably came from some special facility just like the White Room. Other than the White Room, there is only one other special facility that got mentioned in this series, which is Kijima's secret facility. It's been a long time speculation that Koenji was probably raised in that facility, and if Tsubasa also came from that facility, it could explain the strange contact between Koenji and Tsubasa at the end of the Volume 1 second year arc. It was after the knife incident that Tsubasa offered herself to pair up with Koenji in the special exam, and Koenji accepted it easily, leaving Ayanokoji and Horikita in disbelief. There are a few strange things in their pairing up. Their main priority was to prevent anyone from getting expelled, so Tsubasa, who has a high academic rate, should pair up with a student with a low academic level. But as the leader of her class, she chose to pair up with Koenji. There should be a lot of easier ways to contact Koenji, but this strange scene where Tsubasa chose to pair up with Koenji without even know anything about him should be enough to draw the conclusion that there is something going on between them. So, if Tsubasa really came from Kijima's secret facility, that means she was sent by Kijima in order to help or observe Koenji, or Ayanokoji. Throughout the series, Tsubasa put herself closer to Ayanokoji instead of Koenji. At least that is what we know. She chose to support him back in the uninhabited island exam, creating some kind of supportive connection between them. Tsubasa also observed Ichika after Yagami got expelled, and then she chose to join the student council, putting herself close to Horikita, which was close to Ayanokoji. We didn't know what kind of order Tsukishiro would give her in the future, but Tsubasa was already in the perfect place to carry out the order as Tsukishiro saw fit. This theory is not perfect, because there is a chance Tsubasa does not belong to any faction but is just a double agent like Tsukishiro, who plays both sides and tries to rip the biggest benefit from the conflict. However, one thing is clear, Tsubasa is not part of the Atsuomi faction. Tsubasa has a high chance to become an enemy, and Atsuomi most likely knows about it, and that's why he sent Ishigami to school. Back to the previous theory about Tsukishiro becoming a double agent, Atsuomi intentionally let Tsukishiro sell the information about Ayanokoji's enrollment to Kijima. If that was the case, Atsuomi should have predicted that Kijima would send someone to school through Tsukishiro alongside the 5th generation of White Room students, and he needed to prepare a counter for that possibility. However, Atsuomi cannot send another White Room student, because that means he will need Tsukishiro's help to put them on ANHS, and Tsukishiro will definitely sell that information to Kijima. That's why Atsuomi needs someone who could enter the school in a normal way, and that person is Ishigami. According to Ishigami, he just wants to live a peaceful school life, and ANHS is a school that was recommended to him by Atsuomi. However, Ishigami knows about the White Room, and also Yagami is the White Room student, so his peaceful school life story clearly doesn't make any sense. It is confirmed in Volume 1 third year arc that Ishigami has some kind of mission to do inside the school, and both Tsubasa and Tsukishiro just recently knew about it. That means Atsuomi has his own plan that not even Tsukishiro knows about. If we look at Ishigami's record, the only time he was shown taking an action was during Yagami's expulsion. This sudden involvement of Ishigami made me wonder if maybe Yagami's expulsion is part of Atsuomi's plan. That expulsion was mostly Yagami's fault, but if we look deeper into his state of mind, it will be easy to predict what he will do in school. For example, the 5th generation has always been told that Ayanokoji is way better than them. By purposely letting the lower generation know about Ayanokoji, it creates a division among the White Room students. Either they worship him, or grow a baseless hatred toward him. When Yagami acted out of control, Ishigami took action, and pushed Ayanokoji to expel him from school, and I'm sure this is part of Atsuomi's plan because he sent a few White Room agents to attend the cultural festival, and take care of Yagami afterward. In the big picture, sending White Room students to ANHS feels like a futile action. However, Ichika is still in the school, and Ishigami was placed in the same class as her. No matter what Atsuomi's plan is, it's still far from over. They let Ichika stay in school because she shows no harm, and also worships Ayanokoji. In Volume 1 third year arc, it is stated that Ichika already has something she wanted to do in school to make Ayanokoji happy, which means that whatever her plan is, she will always stand on Ayanokoji's side. Perhaps the reason why Atsuomi sent the White Room student is not to expel Ayanokoji, but to prepare Ichika on Ayanokoji's side because he will need her in the future. With Yogami returning to the White Room, Atsuomi already has what it takes to threaten Ichika. And now, with Ishigami as the mastermind and a pawn as strong as Ichika, Ayanokoji could gain very strong support to face against Koenji. Or, maybe Ishigami will become another threat that Ayanokoji needs to face. Whatever it is, the third year arc will not become as peaceful as Ayanokoji hopes. So, in order to observe Ayanokoji and train Koenji at the same time, Kijima put the two of them in the same class. His action is also a preparation for him to face Atsuomi in the future. And if possible, Koenji destroying Ayanokoji will also benefit Kijima because it will become undeniable proof that his special facility is better than the White Room. When Atsuomi sent the White Room student, Kijima sent Tsubasa to spy and keep them in check. Knowing Kijima's plan, Atsuomi chose to send Ishigami in secret, and he purposely expelled Yogami, but kept Ichika in school just in case he would need them to do something for him. Kijima seems confident that Koenji will never lose against Ayanokoji, and his confidence probably comes from Tsukishiro, who sells him the data of Ayanokoji. However, one thing that even Tsukishiro doesn't know is the fact that the data that he has is actually fake data created to motivate the 5th generation of White Room students, while Ayanokoji's real capability is far surpassing their knowledge. With this miscalculation, and probably a huge interference from the new student, the third year arc will become so unpredictable. Of course, this theory could be 100% right or 100% wrong, so let's just wait for all the mystery to be answered, and let me know what you think in the comments.